Welcome to the weekend, and welcome to the HolmFront, more importantly. I am Tyler, your host, and to my right, as always, is Mitch, my overly artistic friend. Mitch?
I'm more important than the weekend that you're having.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so earlier this week, and I'll make sure to put this on the Saturday following,
Okay.
we talked about the movie Sinners
hmm
and what that may or may not have been referencing. So we figured, why don't we just go back through a couple of the stories that had this theme originally, or themes similar to it, that probably inspired Sinners, and let's go over them.
Yeah, just as like a quick breakdown of, where this comes from. So I'm going to kick things off actually with the Faust legend, because that's the oldest archetype of what's called the Faustian bargain. And there's a couple different writers who took different interpretations of the character. The one that I know best is Dr. Faustus by Christopher Marlowe. It's an old British play, and it's essentially, it starts off with the character of Dr. Faustus, and he's saying to himself, it's like, well, I've conquered all the different worlds. I've conquered the physical world. I've conquered the mental world. I've conquered all these different realms. But the one world I've not conquered yet is the spiritual world. And so he decides, in his infinite wisdom, to summon a demon up to his chambers, because he doesn't really believe in this stuff anyways. So he summons in Mephistopheles, and he's like, you know what? I don't believe in this stuff. So how about this? I will sell my soul to Satan, and in return, I want supernatural powers. And so he can have my soul a little early. And Mephistopheles goes, that sounds good. I'll ask him. So he steps off screen, and he comes back, and then he goes, Satan's down with that, but you got to write your name.
He's
on
a messenger.
Yeah.
Just jumping back and forth. Okay.
That's how it happens. And then he comes back, and he's like, Satan's down, but you got to sign your name on a contract in your own blood. And he's like, sure, what does it matter? I don't believe in this stuff anyways. So he signs his name in his blood, and then how he gets his powers is Mephistopheles.
How does he not believe in this? A demon shows up in his house. He's like, you know what? I'm still skeptical. I don't know.
Well, the funny thing is, too, because when Mephistopheles first enters his chamber, he's so hideous, Faustus can't even look at him. And he's like, oh, you're so hideous. Like, come back when you look, more more appealing to my eyes. So he leaves, and then he comes back looking as a human, and he's like, okay, I can work with this now. So, but this is the hypocrisy of Faustus. That's part of the story.
Okay, got it.
So he signs his name
He doesn't
down.
like the dirty truths. He just likes what he interprets as beautiful or okay looking.
Right.
Got it. Okay.
So then
reality is what you make it.
Yeah, what you make it. So he gets Mephistopheles as his servant, and Mephistopheles is the one with the supernatural powers, and he can grant it to Faustus at his whim. But then the rest of the play, in true dry British humor fashion, is just him doing a bunch of parlor tricks with Mephistopheles. You'd think he'd do something really crazy or give himself some kind of, important, prestigious political position or something. But none of that happens. He goes to there's some political dinner or whatever, and then he makes himself invisible and knocks over their food and stuff and laughs at him. And that's it's just gimmicky, dumb stuff like that. And I remember reading it in college for one of my English courses,
Faulty Towers before its time.
Faulty Towers?
It's a show that the guys who made Monty Python and the Holy Grail made.
Okay.
It's extremely dry, sarcastic humor.
It's a lot like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because I was reading it going man, this is some boring stuff. And then at one point I was like, this is pretty low, level stuff. If I had supernatural powers, I'd like to think I'd do something a little more interesting with them. And
He's
I was
just messing with a demon he doesn't believe is a real demon.
Right. Even though he's experiencing the powers. And you're like, dude. So I find the play hilarious, at least to talk about or think about, because, it's this commentary and wow, if you had supernatural powers, you wouldn't really do anything interesting with them. Human beings are a lot less creative than we want to give them credit for. But anyways, yeah, the end of the story comes around and it's time to collect the soul. And depending on what version you're reading, he sometimes gets it, sometimes he doesn't. In the Dr. Faustus one, the Christopher Marlowe, what happens is all his friends tell him, well, you should repent. Ask God to save you. I mean, what have you got to lose? Oh, no, I couldn't. It's too late. I wrote my name in blood. And so he's freaked out. He won't ask for help, and he gets sucked into hell.
Should have seen that coming.
But it's like if he doesn't even try to save himself. So it's just like a story about like a fall, like or like a fool, right? Like someone who's a
Played with
genuine
something
fool.
he shouldn't have.
Right,
Yeah, okay.
exactly.
Because I heard there was a version. I don't know if this is a Faust one, but there's a version where he goes and does repent, and he can't get rid of the contract. It keeps reappearing on his chest as he wakes up.
Okay.
But then he goes to a priest, and the priest burns it. And go figure, it was just fire that was needed. Now those contract's gone, and he's good. He
just needed to take some more affirmative action.
Exactly. Just a couple extra steps he missed.
Yeah.
I watched the movie, and it's
the old black and white.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And to be fair, I only watched about half of it.
Okay.
But that one, he's an old doctor, and a plague visits where he lives, and he can't find a cure. So he makes a deal with the devil to find the cure.
Okay.
But in doing so, he also finds out that he can ask for more. So he asks to be a young man again. So he becomes young and falls in love with this girl, and then just as they're about to kiss or something, time runs out because he gets. Oh, that's right. It's a test period. That's what it was. He's like, I don't know if I believe this, so let me try it out to make sure I know it's real. And then there's like the hourglass. The devil flips it upside down.
Okay.
And he has so much time to test it. So he goes and falls in love, and then just about they're about to kiss, the time runs out, and he has to choose. He's like, I could go back and get the love of my life now while I've got the chance, or I can give it up and live as I was. So he signs the bargain, and then he becomes this famous figure, and he's able to cure people, and he gets the love of his life, and then he becomes bored with life, and that's where I stopped it. He's like unsatisfied with this deal he's made.
If I'm remembering correctly, if it's that old black and white movie from like the 30s, that's the same.
I think it's earlier than that. I think it's 20s.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Really
no.
old, yeah.
No, you're right, because it's the same director who made Sunrise and the original Symphony of Horror, the Nosferatu. Yeah, and that's another one of his noteworthy
pieces. He had
pieces.
a type, clearly.
Yeah. But I've been meaning to watch that one because the Faustian bargain is just, a common literary device that shows up in all kinds of works. And so, it's cool that we have one, just like through the ages of time.
Yep.
You can go back and watch like an old school movie adaptation, but then there's so many others, and we have a few other we want to talk about as well.
Yeah, because I did, before I move on to the other examples, I looked up what people thought of the film at the time, and it seemed like most people's complaints were that it was different than the source material. He had deviated.
Okay.
However, by hearing your description of this and then comparing what I know from the film, it seems like the essence is still there. It's the fact that he makes a deal with the devil and what the consequences of that could be.
Right.
Eventually having to realize, because I know there's some Twilight Zone episodes that deal with that a little bit. But then there's the examples that we'll pull up. So the second one was the one that we referenced, one that I thought Sinners was going to reference.
And then it wasn't really that interested.
And it wasn't. It wasn't in there at all. That's Robert Johnson, the famous blues player. And I think he was in the 20s and 30s. I think in the 1930s is when he became famous because he died in like 38 or something. He's part of what they call the 27 Club.
Okay.
If I understand it correctly, these are a group of artists that died at 27 because that's when he died. This is people like Amy Winehouse, this Kurt Cobain, another one died at 27.
I see.
I think there's a couple others, but those are the ones that I'm familiar with. So there's mystery surrounding his death. There's mystery surrounding his rise to fame. There's mystery surrounding where he went when he became this famous guitar singer or guitar player. But the legend that surrounds him is that he was a player, or he was an attempted player. People hated him though because he just didn't play very well, and so he was chased off stage multiple times. He eventually left. And the ongoing theory, realistically, is that a guy named Ike Zimmerman trained him, so taught him how to play guitar in that year that he disappeared. But the theory is that, the mythological theory is that he went to the crossroads near his house, made a deal with the devil to become the greatest blues guitar player ever, and then he has songs that reference that. The Crossroad Blues, he's got Hellhound on My Trail, like things that allude to the fact that he made a deal and that deal will come due soon.
Well, even like when he was learning under this, teacher, it was in a graveyard they were playing.
Yeah.
So like, what a more apt
I know,
place
yeah.
to start speculating about what else could have been, you
Mm.
know, transcending through that, right?
But regardless, the year timeline of him learning was exceptionally fast, especially with how well he played. So people were
Mhm.
just going to attribute that regardless. They were going to attribute something to help them understand or contextualize this reality.
Well, he became a master, like, you know, in 1 year worth of training. That's fast for
Very.
that to be
For
go
that
f-
level of guitar playing, yes.
right, and for that like degree of disparity, like not even like, oh, he was all right. No, not good at all.
People were chasing him
To
off the
being the
stage. Yeah.
best in his class.
Yeah.
Like that's some serious work. So yeah, it does seem like there's a little bit something else going on.
Something suspicious going on.
Yeah, it's such a cool like mythology. I mean, to like just kind of think about, to know that like it's one of those things that kind of plays into like American myth, because American mythology is very,
It's a mix.
yeah, it's
Mixed
a
bag.
mix, and it's very unique in that there's not a lot of it, because it's not based on ethnicity. It's kind of like whoever is like here present at the time.
Yeah. Well, we're a
And
mixed bag. We got the Native American mythology.
right.
We've got African mythology, and then we've got Irish mythology and English mythology from the people that came in and colonized the place.
Right.
So
So
and then it all
defining
just,
it
like-
becomes very weird.
Yep.
And even like when you're looking at stories like what's the one, the Rip Van Winkle and Sleepy Hollow, those are specifically fables. I'm blanking on the author's name now, but he wrote them specifically because he's like, if we're building a nation here, we're going to call ourselves America, we're going to need mythology and fables. So he was actually a historian, but he was like, there's a real importance in having, you know, just myth. And the thing that's so curious about Robert Johnson is like, here was one where it was projected onto him, because he was a real person and he did
Irving.
play. Yeah, Irving. Yeah, Washington Irving. That's right. But Johnson was like a real person. Like, he didn't make up this mythology. You know, he just did his music. But it was like his story became so surreal almost that at the time everyone like was like, well, there's got to be a deeper explanation. So you start, you know, giving into this.
Yeah, you
These
start building it.
superstitious elements, and then it just kind of is like history takes it from there. But that's what's, I think, kind of enrapturing about it, because you're like, it's so crazy. Like, he must have been just super gifted to have like, you know, excelled to the degree that he did. And like, you can listen to his music, what little we have recorded of it, and it is good. Like, he's really solid. And so I'm like, I get why he was like such an impact for the time.
But it was also the time in which he existed, because he's in Jim Crow South, and he's, you know, he's not supposed to be famous. So the fact that he even superseded the obstacles given to him at the time was another thing that lent to his mythology.
Yeah, talk about like, you know, defeating the odds.
Yeah, seriously. So Robert Johnson was the other one.
And that was kind of like the painting, the checkmate painting. So that one is which he's like playing chess with the devil. I remember that one specifically because there is a movie, I think, of an adaptation, but I haven't seen the movie, but I just always remember that still image. And he's sitting on a beach and he's, you know, playing chess with the devil. But it's kind of an interesting moment of like, yeah, defying the odds, right? It's like the devil stacks the game against you, and you're the one who has to make a move in order to try to, you know.
Well, and the devil is this figure that embodies something supernatural, right? It's something, but not only supernatural, but malevolent. And so it's something that you shouldn't be able to beat. But if you can, you know, then more power to you, essentially.
Yeah, like, exactly. If you can outsmart the devil, like, make a contract with the devil and then outsmart him.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I mean, even Harry Potter plays into that a little bit when, with the Deathly Hallows, where they outsmart death. And that's like the key theme. And the last one is like, how would you do that?
Yep. Yeah, and then we've got Dorian Gray, which alludes to those similar elements. It's not the devil, right, in that one. It's something that's...
No, that one is one that uses it as like a literary device, basically, because there is no devil and there is no like pact necessarily, but, or at least he does make it, but it's only one-sided. He sees his painting of himself and he's so enamored with it, and he's so horrified at the thought that he's going to grow old and he won't, but the painting, he's like jealous of it because the painting will never grow old. It will always capture him in that state. And he's like, why should it be that way? That isn't fair. And so he, in like true self-pity fashion, is like, I would sell my soul if our roles could be reversed. And so it's granted to him, and that's what happens in the story. But it is conditional, like all Faustian bargains.
Of course.
And that's what makes them extra
that's-
interesting, because you know that consequence is always following them, right?
And that one probably leans more into the human condition side of things because, for one, he's arrogant enough to have made that deal.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, which plays into the Narcissus story. But then at the same time, it plays on this element of human curiosity almost, where it's like the only way that you'll reverse it is if you look at the painting. And inevitably, he'll look at the painting.
Yeah.
And he will take on, because he's curious. Like, what would I look like now that this amount of time has gone by? What is the painting taken on? Because he might be bored with his own self by that time, right? Let's say you live 200 years looking the same, living the same life, but you know that something's different under that painting now. And it's hard not to look. I'm going to go check it out.
Yeah, the crazy thing with that one is the novel actually never explains how the two reverse. It doesn't show that to you.
Gotcha.
But that's what makes it extra creepy, because for a long while he does look at the painting and he sees it retain his corruption, because it's not just growing older, it's also retaining like the evil that he does to people around him. So it depicts like the horrors of his inner soul, essentially. And then at some point he covers it up and he's like, I can't look at it anymore. And he starts to just like drown it out, right? But then eventually he does. But like, it's like, it kind of makes you wonder just how sentient the thing is, because it's...
So he's creating a demon that's eventually going to drag him to hell, essentially?
Yeah, kind of.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite novels, because it's just so... I mean, it's, in addition to just being such rich prose, just excellently written, but it is just like a really interesting exploration of like the human
depravity.
Depravity and the human condition, and how like, and that the twist of the end, and just not knowing like how that evil can just like revolt back. It's like a rubber band. You stretch it so much, and then eventually you gotta release, and when it does, it's like, whoo,
it hurt a little bit.
Yeah, but yeah, you can find even like more contemporary examples, like the Ghost Rider comics, which I've not really read, but I know the premise of is the same kind of thing that plays into that narrative.
Yeah, we actually just looked up what exactly the premise is, how it happens, and it's just straight up derivative of Faust. It's
just
Mephisto is the demon that he makes the contract with,
not Mephistopheles.
Yeah,
Mephisto. Oh,
yeah,
yes,
he just kind of cut it
off.
That's a shortened title. Yeah. Very interesting mythology, especially within American culture, just how we've embodied this, because we're a Christian-based culture. And so it would be something a lot more along those lines that we would lend it. Like the devil. It's not, not like a Hades thing or whatever. Like whatever you would attribute to any mythological culture, like we have God, devil, Christ. And so having that as our center point of evil and how we play with it.
Yeah, it is interesting. Oh, playing with it is a nice way to put it too, because it is British, or actually I can't be certain. I think Christopher Marlowe one is British, but some of the ones before that may not be, European at the very least.
Right.
But when it translates to America, you're right, there is like a transformation that happens, and that kind of like, with the Ghost Rider or the Johnson story, it's almost like there's this agency, or like, well, I'm going to use these powers, or I'm going to take this. There's a little bit more
I can
intent.
do it. I'll take care of it when I get there.
Yeah, or I can deal with the devil when he comes around again.
Right.
Yeah, which is not something that you necessarily...
Don't play with that.
Yeah.
Would not recommend.
It's such an engaging myth, though, because it seems like a question that was bound to just develop no matter what happened in life, Like, if you could get powers, but you're going to have to pay your soul.
Yeah.
What's the soul worth to you?
It, yep.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. So you made it to the end of the video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and leave us a comment. We'd love to hear what you thought.